Good morning, everyone. The title of my study is Lexicogrammatical Simultaneity in the Written Communication of Student Leaders. The quintessence of language lies in the fact that human beings can think, feel, explore, and capture reality through it. Its beauty likewise resides in the richness of words and the availability and variety of choices in meaning making. The key point that positions itself in the study is that communication using language is imperative and paramount. The facts forwarded here by the scholars in this slide show such, especially as regards written communication. Salman 2014 emphasizes that written communication is the lifeblood of any company. Arpusamalar and Kanan 2016 also mentioned that the foremost goal of communication or written communication in the business world is for information, request, persuasion, and strengthening of relationships. And of course, language as system of communication is used to express these. This cascades in the business writing of students where the problem lies, again, as evidenced by studies of these researchers on a global scale. Arpusamalar and Kanan 2017 looked into the letter writing skills of Indian students and found out that although tertiary students consider themselves as average or good in letter writing, their outputs say otherwise. Also, Mo 2013 found out that Chinese college students' English writing ability is far from satisfactory. Even English majors show deficiency in their writing, as found out by Nila 2017. Wang and Zhang 2017 also disclosed that 92.3% of their respondents believed that they needed to improve their English writing abilities. In the Philippines, the problem persists as what these researchers, Sikat 2015 and Alarcon 2013 found out. College student skills in grading business writing needs improvement. For Sikat 2015, and that teachers should teach all categories of lexical cohesion to create texture in student essays by Alarcon 2013. This writing concern surprisingly extends to employees in the workplace, both in the academe and otherwise. Also, some administrators and teachers are witnesses of students evidencing of deficiencies more than of strengths. They have seen the need of students to brush up on the basics of writing. At NDMU, Notre Dame of Marble University, due to this identified communication skills problem, English 103 or intensive grammar and communication skills was officially included in almost all curricular programs as a school required subject in the undergraduate level, vis-a-vis the only core English subject in English in the new GE or general education, which is purposive communication. This was based on CMO number 20, series of 2013. This inclusion is to practically enhance the grammar and communication skills of students. In particular, the same problem has also been evident among NDMU student leaders, who as frontliners in student leadership are by default the ones doing correspondence. The written communication or business letters show the need for refinement on some nuances of grammar and mechanics. SFL by Michael Alexander Kirkwood Holliday is both a theory and a method. And things in this research sprung from there. SFL is not viewing text or language use as an object, but as an instrument. It regards language as a means of communication and places function over structure and focuses on how language is used in order to create meaning. It is truly a systematic and comprehensive way of describing the meaning-making possibilities in the language. So for SFL, there is always a choice on how to construe experience. In other words, how meaning is constructed depends on the choices we make when we use language, as well as how we choose from the meaning-making resources that language offers. Such choices we make represent our experience of reality. In SFL then, language is understood to have this primary role as the constructor of reality. So when we create meaning through language, we therefore create reality. FG here, or functional grammar, is another name of SFL. It's a way of looking at the grammar of language, how it is used, and of interpreting the grammar of language as a system by Halliday and Matheson 2014, Fontaine 2013, Martin, Matheson, and Painter 2010. For the statement of the problem, the main focus of the study was to analyze the written communication of student leaders using Halliday's metafunctions of language in the lexicogrammatical level. Specifically, the study intended to answer the following. What meanings construe letters of request and invitation in terms of the following metafunctions under the lexicogrammatical level: ideational, interpersonal, textual? What patterns of meaning can be interpreted in the interplay of the three metafunctions under the lexicogrammatical level in letters of request and invitation? And based on the results, what business correspondence folio featuring lexicogrammatical simultaneity was designed? Now for the theoretical framework, there goes SFL. Below SFL are the metafunctions in the lexicogrammatical level. We know that Halliday's SFL is like a concentric circle. At the core is graphology, and lexicogrammar, or within the clause, is next. Then the discourse semantics, which is beyond the clause, and the outer circle is genre. My study is about the second level, or on the lexicogrammar. All the three metafunctions here are reflected in a huge system network, which specifies all the meaning potentials. The system of transitivity, or clause as representation, this was actually presented on top here in the final paper. This belongs to the experiential function, or experiential metafunction. The two modes for constructing meaning are ideational, or experiential, and logical. Transitivity centers on how language users construe versions of reality in discourse. In other words, we can convey experience differently by employing a wide range of syntactic structures and specific vocabulary choices. So our arrangement of information somehow indicates our ideological positioning. The system of mood, or clause as exchange, belongs to the interpersonal metafunction of language, or of the language. This suggests that mood is the key interpersonal system of the clause and is the grammatical resource for realizing an interactive move in dialogue. And then the theme, or the system of theme, or clause as message, belongs to the textual metafunction of the language. This is the enabling metafunction according to Matheson. So the theory is basically Holiday's metafunction. So it's Holiday 1994. And for the analysis, that's Fontaine's 2013. For the research design, I subscribed to Holiday's metafunction theory-wise. For the analysis, Fontaine 2013, who also patterned her analysis steps to that of Holiday's, was what I followed because they were methodical and suited the SOPs. So we have here, it's a linguistic quality research. Systemic functional linguistics is here. So what I did first was the initial segmentation and interpretation of letters of request and invitation using Holiday's framework. That's for the microanalysis under the 3 metafunctions. And then the interpretation on the patterns of meaning of letters of request and invitation. This is where the lexicogrammatical simultaneity, or according to Fontaine, is also called as a 3-strand analysis for the macroanalysis. And then the business correspondence folio follows. So for the data collection, microanalysis wise, so we have here the ideational, the interpersonal, and the textual metafunctions. And that's what I did for the analysis, and then the troubleshooting, and of course, interpretation. So for the ideational, there was clause listing, then the process test, replacement movement test, followed by the use of probes. So process and participant determination, the labeling of circumstances, and later the drawing of the tables. And so for the interpretation, the experiential strand of meaning was looked into. For the interpersonal, there was again the clause listing, identification of the finite type, then the modal elements identification, and the drawing of the tables. And for the interpretation part, that's where I looked into the interpersonal strand of meaning. For the textual metafunction, again, there was the clause listing. The same clause listing was used, but then this time there's thus the identification of the theme and the rime, and then the drawing of the tables to look into the textual strand of meaning. So that's this is an example in one of the tables for the ideational metafunction. So transitivity system, material clauses in text 1, request internal, because the letters were classified into internal or external. And of course, we have the request and invitation. So that's how I did it for the first metafunction. Okay, that's another continuation of the table. So here we have the first 6 clauses, and then we have 7 up to the 18th clause. Okay, this is an example of a table on the relational clauses in text 1, which is the letter of request. It's an internal letter. And then another for the verbal clauses in the same text. For the interpersonal analysis of the mood system, this is how I did it. Using the table, so it's text 1, again, a letter of request, but this time I looked into the interpersonal level. Okay, that's a continuation of the same table. In the paper, actually, it's just one presentation. It's just one table on one page for each table. And then we have the last 3 clauses for that particular letter. Okay, for the same system, the textual analysis, so this is an example for the simple theme. Again, it's text 1, letter of request, which is internal. This is the continuation. Now, for the textual analysis for multiple themes, again, the same text, here is the table. So that's how I did it. For the macroanalysis, so it's now a text analysis in the lexicogrammatical simultaneity. So it's a three-strand analysis. So we have the presentation of data in a tabular form or box diagrams. So they are not tables anymore, but box diagrams to show the alignment of the various strands of meaning quite clearly. So there is interconnectedness of the three initial segmentation stages. So the ideational or the experiential metafunction, then the interpersonal and the textual metafunctions. And of course, I end up with an interpretation, and it's the conscientious, insightful, and comprehensive interpretation of the text and the patterns of meaning in it. For the folio designing, based on findings and implication from both the microanalysis and macroanalysis, I was able to design the folio. That's how a box diagram looks like for the simultaneity. So we have here, for example, clause number 7. So we have the experiential, the interpersonal, and the textual metafunction. And based from there, was able to make an analysis. This is just an example of one of the clauses where simultaneity of all the three metafunctions was observed. Here are the results for SOP number 1. What meanings construe letters of request and invitation in terms of the following metafunctions under the lexicogrammatical level? So for the ideational, here we have all letters of request and invitation contain mainly material processes, with non-humans construed metaphorically as actors, which construes that what is important, especially with letters of requests and invitations, are not the writer-senders, but rather what it is that they do, like the activity, which shows the experiences of doing and happening. Partly, the verbal process speaks of the experience of saying or verbalizing the actual request or invitation by the writer-sender, who is the sayer of the process, which construes that at one point or another, the writer-senders need to verbalize whatever the requests or invitations to the addressee recipients are to serve the purpose of writing. The occurrence of the mental process with the human censor construes the attitude of the writer-senders as censors who cannot do anything about the request and invitation, but simply convey to their addressee or recipients the experience of the world of their consciousness through desideration or wanting for a positive or favorable response to such request or invitation. So it construes the good-naturedness and politeness of writer-senders, something that is characteristically natural in the real world of requests and invitations. The identifying and attributive relational processes construes the relationship of participants or entities like the organization or the activities or events as realized, or rather realized as token and value and carrier and attribute to provide more useful pieces of information for the consumption of the addressee recipients, so as to grant the request or accept the invitation. Circumstantial elements of location, like place and time, among other related circumstances, are details or information that give clarity to the processes, thereby making the request and the invitation succinct and the correspondence clear and successful. So let's go back here to the generalization. So the material process is the most dominant process found in the letters of request and invitation. And other processes found in the texts are the verbal, relational, and mental processes. For the recommendation for this particular finding, in writing letters of request and invitation, each of the ideational or experiential, interpersonal, and textual grammar of language must be considered for an encompassing, succinct, and clear correspondence. For the generalization for this particular part on the circumstantial elements, Circumstantial adjuncts of location, particularly time and place, among others, add clarity to the letters as regards meaning making. For the interpersonal metafunction, the most dominant pattern in mood choice for the letters of request and invitation, as evidenced by the subject finite, okay, that's the subject finite sequence, is the declarative mood, which construes that the texts are letters and typified as formal ones. The declarative mood choices likewise maintain distance between the writer-senders and the addressee recipients. The sporadic use of the imperative mood is considered as only advisable or low obligation because of the presence of entreaties like humbly or please, which construes the respect and propriety of the writer-senders to the addressee recipients despite the command. For the generalization, we have here the most dominant mood choice for the letters of request and invitation is the declarative mood, although there is the sporadic use of the imperative mood as advisable or low obligation. Still, in the interpersonal metafunction, the instances of median or medium modality of probability in the finite choices, along with the subjects, construes the degree of likelihood of the experiences to happen in the future. So the use of writer-sender reference like I or we and addressee-recipient reference like you construes that the distance that was apparent in the opening part of the letter is bridged through such reference. The use of the present tense or simple present indicative and positive polarity in the finite construes the degree of validity and truthfulness of the information in the present situation, which is the here and now. So for the generalization, there is median or medium modality of probability in the subject finite choices, the use of writer-sender reference and addressee-recipient reference, and the present tense or the recurrent use of the present tense or the simple present indicative and positive polarity in the texts. For the textual metafunction, the dominance of the simple themes, particularly the unmarked experiential themes, presents a message that construes the simplicity and straightforwardness of the texts, given their nature as business letters. Also, the few marked experiential themes construe the foregrounding of an equally important information like enclosures or attachments, thereby calling attention to themselves. So the element of time in the clauses where they are found. So there is a dominance of the simple themes, particularly the unmarked experiential or topical themes, along with a few marked experiential themes in the texts. Thematizing such elements warrants calling attention to themselves, as well as the other equally important information found in the ream. The presence of the multiple theme, especially the textual, followed by the experiential or the topical theme, shows the textual theme like conjunctive adjuncts that construe the link of the relationship of the elements between the clauses within the text, thereby achieving a coherent whole. The occurrence of the interpersonal followed by the experiential theme construes the writer-sender's polite stance in wishing the addressee, recipients, and their concerns in life well, something that is typical in a real-world context of letter writing or in the Christian and Notre Damean context, where students are cognizant, if not really imbibed, with various core values evidenced in their requests and invitations. So for the generalization, there is an occurrence of the multiple theme, especially the textual or experiential topical theme and the interpersonal or experiential theme in the texts. For SOP2 results, as regards the patterns of meaning given the interplay of the three metafunctions, the same results for each strand were presented, but the focus was on the conflation and the simultaneity of all three in some of the clauses. So with the three metafunctions put together, the meaningfulness of dynamism in the ideational level, truthfulness in the interpersonal level, and prominence in the textual level were made apparent, called out and interpreted from the analysis of the data texts. But then again, here are the results. Ideationally or experientially, the recurrence of material process, which means that the non-human actors are of utmost importance. Here in the letters of request and invitation. So the transitivity pattern synopsizes in miniature the very basic aims of request and invitation to give information like the doing and the happening about the participants, like the activities or the organizations that one represents in a way that such participants do the process themselves prior to putting the request or the invitation forward, something that is a typical key feature of letters of request and invitation. So the relationship of two participating entities in the relational clauses are identifying and attributive, that explains and describes what the organization is. Circumstantial elements, especially location and time, or place and time rather, among other related circumstantial adjuncts, especially in material, mental, and relational clauses, are relevant details or information that give clarity to the processes, thereby making the request and the invitation succinct and the correspondence clear and successful. So if we go back here, the generalization, the material process is the most dominant process found in the letters of request and invitation. Also, other processes are found like the verbal, relational, and mental processes. So for the recommendation, language and literature educators may take into account the nuances and considerations of the experiential or the clauses representation, interpersonal or clauses exchange, and textual or clauses message. These considerations of the grammar, in teaching business writing, particularly the letters of request and invitation to their students. Also, while a text may be analyzed using the single strand, it is recommended that the three-strand analysis be used to capture the essence of the text as regards meaning making, most importantly in analyzing other types of texts, or perhaps any other types of letters aside from request and invitation. Interpersonally, the most recurring pattern in mood choice for the letters of request and invitation, as evidenced by the subject finite sequence, indicates the declarative mood structure, which means that the texts are letters and typified as formal ones. The declaratives introduce the subject through the statements of facts and valid information written about them by the writer's senders. So these factual fragments of information are focalized prior to the actual request or invitation, or in these cases, verbalized, which places the writer sender in the role of an authority as information giver. These declarative mood choices likewise maintain distance between the writer senders and the addressee recipients. The sporadic use of the imperative mood is considered as only advisable or low obligation. because of the presence of entreaties like humbly or please, which means that the respect and propriety of the writer senders to the addressee recipients, despite the command, is really apparent. So that's what it says here in the generalization. The most dominant choice for the letters of request and invitation is the declarative mood, although there is the sporadic use of the imperative mood as advisable or low obligation. Also, the median or medium modality of probability, like the subject finite, implies the degree of likelihood of the experiences to happen in the future. So the use of the writer-senders of the I and the we and the addressee-receiver reference, like the you, means that the distance is bridged through such reference. Also, the present tense or simple present tense indicative and positive polarity means that the degree of validity and truthfulness of the information is in the present situation. So for the generalization, there is median or medium modality of probability in the subject finite choices, the use of the writer-sender reference and the addressee-recipient reference, and the recurrent use of the present tense or simple present indicative and positive polarity in the texts. For the textual metafunction, the dominance of the simple themes, particularly the unmarked experiential themes, presents a message that construes the simplicity and straightforwardness of the texts, given their nature as business letters. The few marked experiential themes here construe the foregrounding of an equally important information like enclosures or attachments or the element of time in the clauses where they are found. Thematizing such elements warrants calling attention to themselves as well as the other equally important information found in the read. So there is a recurrence of the simple themes, particularly the unmarked experiential or topical themes, along with a few marked experiential themes in the texts. The presence of the multiple theme, especially the textual followed by experiential or topical theme, shows the textual theme like conjunctive adjuncts that construe the link of the relationship of the elements between the clauses within the text, thereby achieving a coherent whole. So the occurrence of the interpersonal followed by the experiential theme construes the writer-sender's polite stance in wishing the addressee recipients and their concerns in life well. Something that is typical in a real world of context of letter writing, or in the question and Macedonian context, again, where students are cognizant of if not really imbibed with the core values are evidenced in their requests and invitations. So there is an occurrence of the multiple theme, especially the textual, experiential, topical theme, as well as the interpersonal followed by the experiential theme in the texts. For SOP number 3, here is the finding. The designed folio on business correspondence contained descriptions about it in its entirety. Included here are the title, the introduction, the rationale, objectives, salient features like the social function, the generic structure, and the considerable lexicogrammatical features, as well as the description of the samples and the original sample letters, which are reflective of such features and the context of student leaders. So for the generalization, the designed business correspondence folio featuring lexicogrammatical simultaneity of the ideational or experiential metafunction, the interpersonal and the textual metafunctions can be a good reference for letter writing or an instructional material in teaching technical writing. So for the recommendation, the designed business correspondence folio on letters of request and invitation featuring lexicogrammatical simultaneity of the three metafunctions may be considerably recommended by the academic and administrative affairs for use in both the curricular and the extracurricular needs in letter writing of students and student leaders alike. I am showing you now just the cover of the folio. So we have here the front and the back cover. The title is Prep the Psyche, Fly the Pen, a folio on the lexicogrammatical features of letters of request and invitation. If you want, I may also share with you the entire thing. But may I just read the last part about the cover? This folio's cover fundamentally manifests the turning on of the mind, where an amalgam of thoughts and abstractions resides, waiting to flow through every lexicon and grammar of language until they take shape through their silently powerful reveal, writing, or in this case, the letters of request and invitation. Hence, it's titled too, Prep the Psyche, Fly the Pen, a folio on the lexicogrammatical features of letters of request and invitation. This folio, which is packaged separately from the paper, is in essence the byproduct of this study. Hence, this pedagogical contribution to the existing bulk of knowledge and practice on language and communication. Here are two samples of the letters of request. That's sample request letter 1 and sample request letter 2. There are also letters of invitation in the folio. Such samples show the lexicogrammatical features of the texts. So as you can see, only the body of the letter is considered, and they are color-coded. The legends are here. So we have, for example, the non-human participants as actors, in blue, the human participants as sayers, as sensors, material processes, the verbal processes, the mental processes, the relational processes, and also the circumstances of time and place that add clarity to the letters as regards meaning making. We also have the textual theme that transitions to the request and for fluidity. And the simple present tense, the ones which are underlined, the others are in bold. The textual theme here are, I think, italicized. Okay. And so we have the simple present tense that conveys information about the events, and the future tense modality, which conveys the anticipated event. One of my quirks is attention to detail, which is probably why I fell in love with SFL. While everyone is welcome, we all don't need to be SFL analysts ourselves, although almost everyone here is. In fact, we have many luminaries in SFL in this group. All we need to do is simply remember or be reminded that there is beauty in using language, of having choices in meaning making, or in expressing ourselves verbally in writing or otherwise. After all, I don't think we would have wanted to do something as childish as literally sinking our teeth into somebody else's skin, even if we are in the midst of our major frustrations and unresolved problems. We know better, we are better, we embrace better, we do better. Dear friends, esteemed scholars, language is here for our taking. May we choose well. Thank you very much. I am Maria Magdalena F.Cobrador of Notre Dame of Marbella University. Maraming salamat po.